So a bit of an interesting development, and I think you guys are going to be very, very interested in what this video is going to have to say. I think basically it goes to show that, Xbox is extremely viable, and that, it's really poor mistakes that have kind of cost Microsoft at the end of the day. And I think obviously that has to do with like leadership and things like that, because when you look at the things that Xbox has done over the years, it's very easy to kind of point to things and go, okay, well, they really kind of screwed this up, or they really kind of screwed that up. But I honestly hope that people kind of push back a little bit and go, okay, well, I can see what they were going for. I wish they would have stuck it out a little bit longer. At least that's where I kind of stand on this. So how you guys doing? Hopefully everybody's doing well. Very interesting stuff here. They kind of found out basically that Xbox was doing fairly well. To be honest with you, to be completely clear, I think that it's interesting that that this kind of stuff happens. But the Xbox Series X and S, we get this news by way of someone who posted on LinkedIn, because they worked with Xbox. They were senior executive leading global market expansion strategy, hardware devices, go-to-market, post-acquisition, studio integration. But anyway, the main thing that's kind of interesting about this person is we get more numbers on things like what things have sold, right? Like how many Xboxes is sold and things like that, which is something that we never really get a peek inside of anymore, unfortunately. But according to this, very interesting, because hardware and devices led cross-functional go-to-market execution of Xbox Series X and S global launch, navigating supply chain constraints while achieving 12 plus million units sold in the first 18 months across 40 plus countries. So that's a very interesting number, because that's very respectable, good number, right? And this is when you have supply constraints as well. Plus, Microsoft was, at the time of launch, was putting a lot of bets on cloud gaming. Unfortunately, they were using a lot of the parts that could have went into like an Xbox Series X and putting them into cloud gaming infrastructure, because they thought, with lockdown and everything, people would want to game, and they wouldn't want hardware. Obviously that's not the case, because people were happy not to would rather not game than game on the cloud, which that tells you pretty much everything you need to know about the cloud. But just imagine, like, say they weren't supply constrained, they could have easily sold 18 million units in that first, year and a half, which would have been incredible. Now, you look at this and you go, okay, well, what really changed to where, they weren't doing as well? So the thing that's interesting is people bought an Xbox Series X at first. They're excited for it. It's got some cool features. A lot of people like me decided to buy one once they announced that they were buying ZeniMax, because, we all thought that it'd be huge. They're going to have all these ZeniMax games that are going to be exclusive and all this kind of stuff. But that didn't end up being the case. But you can see things start to kind of cool down after 2021, because if you look at the best Xbox sales they've ever had was the last few months of 2021, and the reason why was because they released Flight Sim, Halo Infinite, Forza Horizon 5, three games back to back to close out the year. And so they had phenomenal. I think this is like the only time that they won like the NPD or whatever as well, because of that lineup. And then 2022 of course comes around and they have 0 exclusive games, right? So for AAA exclusive games in 2022. So that really kind of, I think, hampered the sales and stuff like that. Then you fast forward and there starts to be rumors about, hey, they're about to like not do, they're gonna not do exclusives anymore and things like that. That's a real issue. That's a real bad issue, because that's when you really start to see things kind of fall off. So I think that it's going to be interesting how they handle this, and like how they handle this kind of stuff going into the future. Like, I feel like do they care enough about games? Do they care enough about, you know, their own platform or their own hardware to stay, you know, interested in kind of what's going on? Like, I think that's the thing that that we're all going to have to kind of have to wait and see. You know, like, I personally, if you were to ask me, like, hey, how do you think Microsoft feels about, you know, the hardware? I would say, well, despite what they're saying, it really does feel like they don't care about the hardware, you know, and that's an unfortunate situation to be in, because there's even people that go, okay, well, if they do end up, you know, being in a situation where stuff happens, you know, where, let's just say, for instance, there is a delay, right, because of the memory situation. There's rumors going around that says, okay, well, if there's a delay, and, you know, Microsoft might just decide corporately to kind of go out and say, okay, well, you know, we're not going to do, you know, we're not going to do hardware now, right? Because if it's 2029, 2030, like, what's the point at that point? Because I think, honestly, for me, I really believe that Microsoft had really, with this whole Magnus thing, is just intended to get people onto the PC platform. And, you know, once that starts happening, I think, honestly, the idea is to just, you know, okay, we have people on PC, we can totally stop hardware now, and, you know, once we've stopped hardware, you know, we don't have to worry about this stuff anymore. So, you know, I think that could be possibly the idea behind it. I'm not 100% sure if that's going to be the case, but, you know, we'll kind of have to wait and see. For me anyway, like, the way that I look at it, I just honestly just feel like Microsoft has kind of just really hurt themselves into a way that they won't be able to ever kind of come back from. So, you know, again, you know, Microsoft will probably, you know, like, am I sure they'll ever do another console? Like, I have no clue, to be honest with you. I would love to say, hey, yeah, I'm sure they'll have another console, they'll have something else, but honestly, I don't feel like they're that vested in, you know, in what they're doing. You know, I just honestly don't feel like they're that vested in the platform enough to kind of care, and that's unfortunate, because I think Xbox, you know, they could have done so well if they would have just put something behind it. And the thing is, it always grates me a little bit, is I always get this person, well, they can never compete with PlayStation and blah blah blah. It's like, how do we know? The only times they ever really tried to compete with PlayStation and try to outmaneuver PlayStation is Xbox 360, and they kicked the crap out of PlayStation for many, many years, right? I mean, you can go, oh, well, you know, PlayStation eventually caught up. Nothing officially, by the way, like, Sony never announced it or anything like that. But what is officially known is that Xbox 360 won something like 32 straight NPDs to close out the Xbox 360's life. So, like, it doesn't sound like to me like PlayStation would have been able to catch up to that, but, you know, who knows, you know, like, at this particular point. But we do know that PlayStation lost like $6 billion on the PS3 generation, and Microsoft made money. So, you know, it's a little bit weird to me. They actually tried, you know, they had games for, you know, they had games and exclusive content and all the stuff that you would need to get people excited. And then you move ahead, they shot themselves in the foot with the Xbox One and quit halfway through that generation. And then they did the same thing this generation. Like, when was the last time they really were trying? You know, I think Xbox Series consoles are pulled out of most countries. Most places aren't selling them at all anymore. So, yeah, it's a weird situation we kind of find ourselves in. But how do you guys feel about this stuff? I'm sure that, you know, some of you guys have some information. But what could have been if they would have just believed in their own product? You know, it's a shame that that it seems like they don't believe in their own product, but, you know, we'll see what's happening when it's all said and done. So I appreciate you guys watching. I just, you know, I feel like it's unrealized potential from Microsoft. You know, like, you could have done something special. You didn't even need to keep everything exclusive, but it's like, damn, man, if you guys just would have been clear about things. Okay, well, you know, we're going to keep Halo, Gears, Forza, Fable, you know, blah 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 blah, but, you know, if something's been somewhere else before, we'll go ahead and, you know, keep that there. New IPs exclusive to Xbox, whatever like, whatever. You know, you could have done something. Like, now people realize, like, hey, this stuff is going to come everywhere. They don't care about Xbox, and if Microsoft doesn't care about Xbox, why should anybody else? That's like a legit question that a lot of people should be asking themselves. So anyway, rack 'em up. Crap Gamer out.